Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a pair of worn leather shoes with curled up toes and bells that jingle every time you move. You're not a noble, not a soldier, not a peasant either, but something stranger. You're the one they point at, laugh at, and sometimes even fear, though you wear a painted grin. The court jester, a living joke in a world that takes itself far too seriously. Imagine cold stone floors beneath your feet, the smell of roasted meats in the banquet hall, and all eyes fixed on you waiting to be entertained or else. Let's be real, you probably wouldn't survive this job. It's not just jokes and juggling, it's politics, danger, and humiliation wrapped in motley. And if you think being funny today is hard, try doing it in front of a drunk king who just executed someone for blinking wrong. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a grand stone corridor. The walls are lined with cold tapestries fluttering in the winter draft. Somewhere down the hall, you can hear laughter, loud, raucous, unkind. Your feet hurt, your costume is tight in the wrong places, and your stomach's been empty since midday. But it doesn't matter. You're on next. The lord of the castle wants entertainment, and you are quite literally paid to be laughed at, or paid in leftovers. Or maybe just not whipped today. It depends on the Lord's mood. You shuffle toward the great hall bells on your hat, tinkling with every step. There's no door, you're expected to walk right in like a dog, summoned by the snap of fingers. The fire crackles high in the hearth, casting dancing shadows over long wooden tables. Drunken knights slap backs and guffaw their cups, sloshing spiced wine. The noble guests barely glance your way. You're not one of them. You're decoration, a human distraction, the king's breathing amusement. They call you by your stage name, not your real one. No one uses your real name anymore. You almost forget it yourself. And as the room grows quiet, a heavy silence falls. It's time to perform. You bow low, flipping into a somersault, and spring up with a flourish, arms spread. You launch into a rhyme about the baron's receding hairline. It gets a laugh, but not from the baron. He stares you down like he's deciding whether to have you flogged or merely humiliated. Being a jester is a delicate dance. Too tame and you're boring. Too daring and you're dead. You live on the razor's edge of satire, and your blade has dulled over the years from too many nights like this. You juggle 3 apples, one's moldy, one's bruised, and one's fresh. You announce this is how the kingdom makes decisions. Another round of laughter. But not from the steward. In this moment you realize the paradox of your profession. You have license to mock the powerful, but only because they believe you're powerless. The moment they feel threatened by your words, your license is revoked. Permanently. You end the act with a ridiculous dance, limbs flailing like a puppet cut loose. The crowd roars not with joy, but with cruelty, the kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl. You bow again, heart pounding, and shuffle backward out of the room, head down, eyes low. You retreat to your chamber, which is really just a cot behind the stables. There's straw for a bed and mice that eat more than you do. Your costume lies in a heap, patched, stained, and still faintly smelling of cabbage from last week's performance. You sit down and rub your aching feet, recalling how you got here. You weren't born to this role. No one is. Maybe you were once a traveling actor or a peasant's clever child, who learned early how to survive by making others laugh. The court needed distraction. You needed a roof. It was a deal with no paper, just hunger and desperation. And here you are. Outside, the wind howls across the courtyard. You hear shouting in the halls. The Baron didn't find your joke funny after all. There's talk of sending you to the stocks in the morning. Maybe you'll be lucky, maybe they'll forget. But you know they won't. And so you lie there staring up at the timbered ceiling bells on your hat, still gently chiming with each shallow breath, wondering if tomorrow you'll still be the fool or just another forgotten one. And that's only the beginning of what made being a jester so miserable. You wake to the sound of hooves clattering across the flagstones. It's not morning, it's barely past midnight, but a messenger has arrived. From your cot in the stables, you peer through the cracks in the wooden boards. A rider in royal livery dismounts, his breath steaming in the frigid air, and hands a scroll to one of the guards. The seal is unmistakable, the king's crest. That's not good. You've been summoned to court. Not just the great hall of your little lord's castle, but the royal court. The real thing. That means travel pressure and an audience so powerful your very existence is beneath their notice. Unless you screw up. Then you're very much noticed, and not in a way anyone survives. By dawn, you're packed into the back of a cart, with sacks of grain and a chicken who stares at you like it knows something you don't. You're still in costume because that's the expectation. If you're not jingling, you're not worth the ride. The cart bumps and rattles for days, passing through muddy villages and gloomy forests, each mile eroding whatever courage you had left. You practice new jokes under your breath. You test juggling apples again, but the bruised ones rotted by now, and the fresh one rolled under the cartwheel on day 2. When you finally arrive at the royal city, the castle looms like something from a fevered dream. Towers pierce the sky. Walls crawl with guards. And inside it smells like incense perfume and a kind of slow, crushing judgment. Nobles glide past you like shadows in embroidered cloaks. No one smiles. No one laughs. You're escorted down a long corridor with polished floors that reflect your ridiculous shoes back up at you. A servant hands you a new outfit, bright red and yellow with gold bells and a hat shaped like a duck's head. It's so absurd you nearly cry. But you can't. That would ruin the face paint. Because yes, you're expected to wear paint here. White base, black-lined eyes, red circles on the cheeks. A smile drawn so wide it could hold back a scream. You stand in the wings of the royal hall, waiting to be called. Your heart drums like a war march. You hear the steward's voice boom through the echoing chamber, His Majesty's fool, and you step out. The room is silent at first. The king is perched on a throne flanked by guards who don't blink. The queen doesn't even look up. A few courtiers murmur. Somewhere in the back, a bishop glares like laughter is a mortal sin. You take a deep breath and start with something light, slapstick, a pratfall, an exaggerated impression of the castle's gatekeeper. A few chuckles. Good. Then you go bolder, political maybe. A mock duel with invisible swords while quoting the Duke's most recent speech word for word, but in a goat voice. The room stills. The Duke looks furious. The king, he's watching you, not laughing, not smiling, just watching. And then he laughs, a single bark of laughter. Sharp, loud. It cuts through the air like a whip. The whole room joins in. The pressure eases. You've survived another day. You bow spinning as you go and exit to the side, every inch of you shaking. But you're not done. The king summons you again at supper, then again at midnight. The court is bored. You're their remedy, their living puppet. Every time you perform, you shave off another piece of yourself until you wonder if anything human remains beneath the bells and grease paint. Behind the scenes, the other jesters are no kinder. Yes, there are others. This is the royal court after all. One jester is never enough. There's a hunchback who specializes in cruel mimicry, a woman who can recite vulgar poems while standing on her head, a dwarf who juggles flaming knives, and all of them, just like you, are desperate to remain valuable. Because once you're not funny anymore, you're a liability. They whisper about a jester from 3 summers ago who made a joke about the Queen's singing voice. No one's seen him since. They say his body was used as target practice by the royal archers. You sleep in a small chamber near the kitchens now. It's warmer than the stables, but it smells of boiled cabbage and burnt milk. The stone walls are close and damp. You hang your costume over a hook near the fire, hoping it dries by morning. Your hands ache. Your back's stiff from pratfalls and acrobatics on marble floors. And your mind, it's slipping. Every day you must invent something new. Every hour you must be sharper than before. You start dreaming in rhymes. You wake up with jokes half-formed on your tongue. You laugh at nothing. You talk to the chicken from the cart in your head. You name it Reginald. The royal children begin to play cruel games with you, tying your shoes together, slipping oil on the floor where you practice. One dares you to pretend to be a dying dog during supper. You do it. Of course you do. It gets a roar of laughter from the king. Afterward, the boy throws a bone at your face and says, "Good dog. You're nothing more than furniture here, but not inanimate. No, you move, you perform, you exist for their delight and derision. You are entertainment given breath. But when that breath no longer brings laughter, it will be snuffed out without a second thought. And as you lie in your cot that night, makeup still clinging to your skin, bells still faintly ringing, one thought gnaws its way through your foggy brain like a rat through stale bread. What happens to a jester who forgets how to laugh? The fire dies, the wind howls, and your answer waits somewhere in tomorrow's performance. The next morning, you're jolted awake by a kitchen maid slamming a pan near your head. She mutters something about lazy clowns and shuffles off before you can even mumble a reply. Your back feels like it was used as a shield in a barroom brawl. Your legs don't want to move. But move they must. The king has a guest arriving today, and you've been ordered to prepare something special. No further instructions, just special. Whatever that means in a place where a bear on a unicycle might be considered old news. You crawl out of bed and make your way through the servant tunnels, the hidden arteries of the castle that let you slip through unseen unless someone important wants to see you. You pass other staff along the way, scullery boys, pot washers, candle trimmers, all of them avoiding eye contact. Even among the lowest of the low, you sit somewhere near the bottom. You spend the morning in the courtyard rehearsing. You try a tightrope act with a frayed rope strung between 2 laundry poles. You trip on the second pass and slam down hard, bruising your hip and ego in equal measure. The chicken, yes, Reginald, who somehow ended up here too, watches you from atop a barrel. You swear he shakes his head in disappointment. Midday bells chime. A carriage arrives. The guest is a duke from the southern provinces known more for his temper than his taste. You've heard stories. He once had a lute player flogged for playing in the wrong key. This should go well. You're summoned before the meal. No build-up. No warm-up act. Just you, a goblet of water, and a platter of spoiled fruit for props. The royal family is seated in a semicircle. The Duke, a red-faced man with jowls like melting butter, lounges in a fur-lined chair. You begin with a riddle. Something safe. Something clever. Nothing. You launch into a story, a satire technically about a noble who gets lost in his own vineyard and drinks from a chamber pot. You do the voices, the expressions, the pratfalls. A couple of smiles. No laughter. You go bolder. You mime the queen's hound. You juggle a pear, a spoon, and somehow a boot. You imitate the Duke's accent with just enough exaggeration to be noticed, but not enough to offend. You hope. Then you see it. The Duke's mouth twitches. A sound escapes him. A chuckle. You seize the moment. You mimic a knight in armor trying to use the latrine. The hall erupts. Laughter. Real booming laughter. Even the queen covers her mouth. The Duke claps his thigh. The king laughs loudest of all. You've done it. And then just as the final laugh fades, the Duke raises his hand. Silence. That last one, he says slowly, was it. About me. The room freezes. Your heart stops. You smile, wobbling like a leaf in a gale. Only if your grace fights dragons in the garderobe. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't speak. He just raises his goblet and drinks. The king clears his throat. Good fool, you may go. You bow and back away, face-burning hands trembling. That night you can't sleep. Every creak in the walls sounds like boots. Every gust of wind like the whisper of guards coming to drag you out. You lie in your cot, still in full costume, eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for the knock that might not come. Morning arrives. You're still alive. But something's changed. From now on, you notice the guards watch you more closely. You're summoned less frequently. Whispers trail you in the hallways. One of the kitchen boys won't meet your gaze. You suspect someone's been told to keep notes. You're no longer just entertainment. You're dangerous. Ironically, that should be thrilling. Isn't this what jesters once were? Truth-tellers wrapped in motley sacred fools who could say what no one else dared, maybe. Once, but not here. Here you're a threat with bells on, and threats don't get forgiven. They get removed. The other jesters keep their distance now. You catch them whispering together in corners, casting glances your way. You've become a liability to them, too. If one jester offends a noble, the rest might be punished in kind. It's happened before. So they freeze you out. One afternoon you return to your cot to find your hat shredded. Your painted bells melted in the fire. A smear of pig grease across your bedding. No one saw anything, of course. You say nothing. What would be the point? Instead, you gather what's left, mend what you can, and return to the courtyard. Reginald follows. You juggle stones. You rehearse monologues. You practice falling just right so it looks painful without breaking a rib. Because that's what it means to be a jester now. It's not just about surviving the stage, it's about surviving the silence afterward. The moments when no one laughs and every heartbeat feels like a countdown. You begin to forget your real name. the one your mother used to whisper when tucking you in. That name's gone buried beneath years of performances and pain. You are fool now. Court jester. Nothing more. And yet, somewhere in the marrow of your bones, a flicker remains. You used to love making people laugh. Used to. It rains for a week straight, turning the castle grounds into a mire of slippery cobblestones and flooded courtyards. You're ordered to entertain indoors now, where nobles cluster in drawing rooms like bored cats with knives. The fire crackles, the tapestries drip with damp, and the mood in the castle grows heavier with each passing day of gloom. And you, of course, are the designated sunshine. You're called into a small chamber where the queen and her ladies pass idle hours with embroidery and thinly veiled gossip. You're still limping from a poorly executed tumble 2 days ago, but no one asks why. Pain doesn't matter here. Performance does. The queen doesn't look at you directly. She never does. Instead, she waves a delicate hand and says, "Let's have something cheerful. We're all bored stiff. That's the whole prompt. Cheerful." So you dance, you sing an off-key tune about 2 monks who walk into a tavern. You spin juggle candlesticks, trip over a chair intentionally this time, and feign outrage when one of the ladies tosses a grape at your nose. They laugh. Not kindly, but they laugh. The queen smiles and says, "Better." Almost charming. Almost. You bow and back away as always, careful not to turn your back until you're through the door. Jesters have been killed for less. Outside the room, you let out a long breath and lean against the wall, shaking. One of the guards chuckles as he walks by. "She likes you," he mutters. "For now." That "for now" settles into your bones like the cold. Because he's right. Your job has always been about balance. Walk the tightrope between mockery and murder. But lately, the rope feels thinner, and your footing worse. The other jesters have begun to sharpen their claws. One afternoon, the female jester, Rena, corners you near the kitchens. She's smaller than you, but her voice slices like glass. "Stop trying so hard," she snaps. "You make us all look bad. You're not special fool, just loud." You nod, say nothing. You've learned that words can't fight whispers. You just juggle louder and fall harder. It's all you have. That evening, the king announces a feast in honor of a visiting bishop. All jesters are ordered to perform a joint piece. You dread these collaborative acts. Too many egos in one room, all desperate for the last laugh. And you're the one they hate most. Backstage, tempers flare. The dwarf jester demands the opening line. Rena wants to close. The hunchback claims he's written a new song that actually rhymes this time. You offer to do the pratfall again. No one argues. They know you fall better than any of them. The performance begins. The hall is full. Nobles lined shoulder to shoulder, dripping with jewels and wine. The bishop sits near the king, stiff as stone. His eyes narrow. He is not a man who enjoys jokes. You open the act with a ridiculous bow and a joke about monks who brew their own wine. It gets a few polite chuckles. Rena juggles candles and sings. The dwarf juggles Rena. The hunchback dances on a stool while reciting dirty couplets. It builds. The laughter grows. And then the final scene, a mock court trial. You're the accused of being too clever for your own good. It's scripted. You know your lines. But something's wrong. The hunchback veers off script. He starts improvising. "Tell me, Jester," he booms, "what else have you mocked behind our backs? The Duke, the King. Perhaps even the holy bishop." The room goes still. Your mouth dries. You improvise a response, something light, something about being too stupid to scheme. You make it funny. You hope. The king laughs once, a sharp bark. The bishop does not. Afterward, backstage, you corner the hunchback. "What was that?" you hiss. He grins, teeth yellow. "Just a joke, friend." But you both know it wasn't. That night, you don't sleep. The next morning, you find your costume soaked in the latrine bucket. Your shoes are missing. You perform that day barefoot with borrowed sleeves that are too tight and a hat that smells of vinegar. You still get the laughs, and maybe that's why they hate you. Because in this court, being a jester isn't just a job, it's a threat. Every smile you earn is a coin they didn't. Every laugh is a reminder that you're still here, still clinging to your place by sheer desperation and bruised knuckles. Your life is applause and silence back to back. You start hearing voices when no one speaks. You dream of bells ringing underwater, and still you perform. Because what's the alternative? No one retires a jester. They just stop laughing. And then you disappear. You begin keeping a mental count. Not of performances, not of coin. Those were never reliable measures anyway. No, you count the laughs, the real ones. Not the polite chuckles or cruel guffaws, but the honest ones, the startled bursts of joy that slip past a noble's polished facade. You get one, maybe two a week. Less lately. It's like trying to catch fireflies in a thunderstorm. You tell yourself if the number drops to 0, you'll stop. Just stop. You're not sure what that means yet. Maybe walk into the forest and keep walking. Maybe take Reginald the chicken and live among monks. Maybe disappear like the last jester who wasn't funny anymore. No one ever said what happened to him. He just vanished between performances. Tonight, you've been summoned again, not to the Great Hall, but to the king's private dining chamber. That alone is unusual. More unusual is that you're to entertain only the king and his advisor, a gaunt man with eyes like smoke and a voice that sounds like parchment being torn. The chamber is intimate. Candlelight flickers over golden plates and steaming meats. The king leans back in a chair too large for the room, sipping wine that probably costs more than your entire existence. The advisor barely touches his food. He watches you. You launch into a monologue, something quick and clever about the court's obsession with falconry. The king smirks. The advisor does not. You move on to impersonations. The cook, the steward, even the queen's scribe who speaks in such slow syllables, it's like listening to paint dry. The king snorts. The advisor glances away. Then you try a rhyme about the royal treasurer's double chin. A risk, but a mild one. It lands. You see the king's face twitch with amusement. Success. And then the advisor speaks. "Tell me, Jester, do you believe your role here is valuable?" The question is so direct, it hits like a slap. You blink. "I bring laughter, my lord." To whom he asks, still staring. The king says nothing. You hesitate. To the court, the kingdom, his majesty. And if you were gone tomorrow, would they weep for you? Would the kingdom fall into ruin? You try to joke. Perhaps it would run smoother, sire. The advisor does not laugh. You're dismissed not long after. No applause. No coins. Just a nod, and the scraping of chairs as they rise and leave. You bow and retreat, your stomach twisting into knots. That night, you sit on the steps of the kitchen entrance, the only place still warm this late. Reginald nestles beside you. He doesn't cluck anymore, he just watches. You feel the same. Muted. Faded. You remember the first time you made a crowd laugh. Really laugh. It was in a village square years ago. You wore a tunic that didn't fit shoes that weren't yours. And you juggled turnips until one exploded in midair and hit the mayor's daughter in the face. She shrieked. The crowd roared. It was glorious. You had nothing, and you had everything. Now you're surrounded by silk gold roasted boar, and you feel like a ghost in motley. The next morning there's a decree posted on the courtyard gate. A new tax on livestock, another on beer, a third on road access. The peasants mutter. The merchants groan. You, for some reason, are summoned to explain the taxes in performance. Yes, that's right. You are to make the new taxes funny. You're marched out in front of a gathering of city dwellers, the baker, the smith, even the woman who sells wilted herbs on market day. You're flanked by guards. A royal scribe stands by with a scroll. You're told to lighten the blow. You crack a joke about the king needing new slippers made of swan feathers. A few laughs. You pretend to be a noble, confused about why peasants need so many coins anyway. It works. Barely. But then someone shouts, "Why don't you tax yourself, clown?" More shouts follow. Angry ones. Someone throws a turnip. It misses. The guards step forward. Batons out. The crowd backs off. You bow back away and flee down the alley before things turn worse. You hear later that 2 were arrested. You weren't even funny. You were a shield, a distraction. You were the king's smile painted on a cudgel. Back at the castle, no one cares. No one even asks how it went. You curl up in your cot that night, not bothering to undress. Your costume is soaked with sweat and turnip juice. You don't even smell it anymore. You just lie there, bells twitching with each breath, waiting for morning, like a prisoner waits for sentencing. And still no answer comes to the question from the advisor. Would they miss you? You know the truth, but you don't say it out loud. Not yet. The season turns. Spring sneaks into the corners of the kingdom like a timid servant, hesitant, wet, and half welcome. The stone walls begin to sweat. The air shifts, and flowers start blooming in the gardens where you're not allowed to walk. You watch them through narrow windows as you're called back into service for yet another banquet. This one is for a visiting princess. She's young foreign and reportedly fond of lively performances, which in your world translates to acrobatics, shouting, and the occasional pie to the face. You sigh and rehearse a few balancing acts in the corridor, bruising your elbows again on the same rough stone that's cut you 100 times before. The feast is loud. The princess smiles politely at the musicians, applauds the dancers, and finally turns her wide eyes toward you. You launch into your act, tumbling, juggling, balancing a spoon on your nose while reciting a poem about a drunken knight who married his horse. The laughter is polite but not warm. not real. Still, it's better than silence. Halfway through the act, you're prompted to do impressions. You mimic the king carefully, lovingly, with just enough exaggeration to win him a chuckle. You do the queen's hound again, the court steward's stiff walk, and the way the bishop mutters his prayers under his breath like he's bargaining with Gumtska. The princess claps. The king smiles. You survive another evening. Afterward, as the guests filter out, she approaches you. That never happens. Nobles don't speak to jesters unless they're angry or drunk. She's neither. She studies you. Is it fun, she asks in broken common tongue. To make them laugh, you pause. No, you say. She blinks, then laughs. Good answer. She walks away, leaving the scent of citrus and freedom in her wake. You stare after her for a long time. That night you sit with Reginald again. You've started talking to him more, not just in your head, but aloud. You tell him about the princess, about how she didn't look at you like a toy, about how she laughed not at you, but with you, you think. Reginald stares as always, offering neither comfort nor judgment. But you imagine he understands. The days blur again. Another spring festival, another storm, another feast. You perform in the rain, slipping in the mud, while nobles watch from dry archways. You crack a joke about fish swimming through the royal wine cellars. No one laughs. The jester hunchback Rafe is caught stealing coins. Not from the king, but from the kitchen staff. A low crime, but enough. He's beaten publicly and thrown into the outer cells. You don't see him again. They say he took his own bells off, which is a euphemism. You try not to think about it. The rest of the jesters grow quiet. Even Rena stops sniping. She just performs and disappears. You start to wonder if her silence is grief or strategy. You try writing your own material again. Short songs, limericks, one-man scenes. You rehearse in the servants' stairwells when no one's watching. One morning a page stumbles across you, mid-monologue, and bursts out laughing. It startles you. You realize you haven't heard genuine, spontaneous laughter in weeks, maybe longer. And it felt good. You ask the steward to let you perform a solo show in the courtyard. Just once. A spring performance. A festival of fools, perhaps. You frame it as a morale booster, a celebration of the changing season. He agrees barely, after reminding you that one misstep will not just cost you your position, but possibly your bones. You prepare like it's the only thing that matters. Because it is. You sew a new costume using scraps from the tailor's reject pile. It's mismatched, threadbare, and absolutely hideous. Perfect. You rework your material. Mix the old with the new. Time the pratfalls to the jokes. Practice until your joints scream. When the day arrives, a small crowd gathers servants, lower guards, a few curious nobles. Even the queen watches from her window. You breathe deep, step into the courtyard, and begin. It goes better than you could have hoped. The new jokes land. The physical bits work. You weave a story about a jester who travels the world and learns to laugh again. It's silly. It's sweet. It's maybe too close to the truth. But the crowd loves it. You end with a bow so deep your spine cracks. The applause is soft but honest. It's more than you expected. Later, as you gather your props, the steward approaches. You brace for criticism. Instead, he says His Majesty was pleased. That's it. But it's everything. You sleep well that night. The first time in months. You dream of open fields, not stone walls, of crowds laughing with you, not at you. And in the dream, you're not wearing bells. You're just you, whoever that is. The afterglow of your courtyard performance clings to you longer than it should. For a few days, people smile when they pass you in the corridors. The kitchen boy offers you an extra heel of bread. Even the steward nods when your name is mentioned. You feel like you've stepped slightly out of your usual shadow, like you might finally exist as more than a painted fool. But you should have known better. The king's mood turns. No one says why, no one ever says why, but it happens the way storms do, suddenly, without warning. One day he's laughing over roast goose. The next he's silent at supper, cutting his food with the same precision he might use on someone's reputation or throat. That night, you're called to his chamber, not to perform, but to listen. An odd change. You stand in the corner while he speaks to his advisor in low-clipped tones. Something about unrest, about tone and disrespect, about keeping the people sweet. Then he turns to you, Jester. He says, "You're good with the peasants, aren't you?" It isn't a question. You nod. "I try, Your Majesty." "Good," he says. "You'll be traveling, a tour, across the outlying towns, boost morale, remind them of their place." You nod again, heart sinking. A traveling fool. That's not promotion. That's exile dressed in velvet. Still, you pack your bag, pat Reginald on the head. "He's staying behind," the steward says. "Too valuable a kitchen chicken now," and climb into a wagon with peeling paint and a wobbly wheel. You're given one servant, one guard, and a list of towns, some barely more than mud puddles with names. The road is long. Days blur. You perform in markets on hay bales beside wells. You sing, juggle, tumble, shout. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes no one laughs. Sometimes the children stare at you like you're a ghost in rags. But sometimes someone does laugh. A woman at the bread stall. A boy missing half his teeth. A one-legged farmer who chuckles so hard he almost falls over. And those moments, they're gold. Not coins, real gold. The kind that can't be melted or taxed or counted. Just remembered. You write new material on the road. Observational stuff. What it's like to be ignored by a horse. The mysteries of communal latrines. A bit about noble fashion that goes over surprisingly well with drunk shepherds. You're sleeping in barns again. Eating soup that's mostly water. Washing in rivers, dressing in shadows, performing until your knees throb and your throat is raw. But oddly, you feel more alive out here than you ever did at court. No whispers behind your back. No staged sabotage. No bishops scowling over innuendo. Just dirt wind and your voice. You start to feel like yourself again. You even remember your name one night. It comes to you in a dream. Your mother's voice calling across the market. You wake up crying, but quietly so the guard doesn't see. Weeks pass, then months. One evening you reach a town larger than most. It has stone buildings, 2 taverns, and a square with a stage. You're announced like royalty. The king's own fool, they say. The square fills. People cheer. You give the best performance of your life. You blend the old and the new, the ridiculous and the real. You impersonate the king just enough. You describe court life with flair. You even tell a quiet joke about yourself, a fool who traveled so far to find what he lost, a reason to laugh. They applaud, not because they're ordered to, because they want to. It shakes you. You bow, and bow again. Then from the crowd, someone throws something. You flinch. But it's not a stone. It's a flower. You pick it up stunned. A simple daisy wilted at the edges, but beautiful all the same. A thank you. Later, over watery stew at the tavern, you ask the serving girl if she knows who threw it. She just shrugs. Everyone liked you, she says. Might have been anyone. You keep the flower. Press it in your notebook between pages of half-finished rhymes and grease-stained jokes. You stay in that town 3 days. Every night you perform. Every morning someone leaves you bread. One day someone paints your likeness on the tavern wall, crude, lopsided, but grinning. Not the forced grin of court. A real one. When your tour ends, the guard says, "Back to court." You hesitate, but you climb aboard the wagon, because that's what fools do. They return, even if they're not sure why. Even if something inside them is finally beginning to understand they were never the joke. It was the world. The castle feels smaller when you return. Not literally, it's still a monstrous labyrinth of stone and echo, but you feel larger now. Not in stature, but in knowing. You've seen the towns, the faces, the real people who laugh, not because they're commanded to, but because they need to. You've stood barefoot in the mud and made someone forget their hunger for one glorious minute. That kind of laughter sticks to the ribs. But back here, it's different. The air is tight, formal, stale with rules and unspoken expectations. As you pass through the gates, the guards barely acknowledge you. One mutters, "Thought you died on the road." You bow and quip, "Only a little," and he smirks, but it fades quickly. Your cot behind the stables has been claimed by a scullery boy. Reginald, now fully a fat and pampered kitchen mascot, ignores you. You sleep the first night in the hallway outside the laundry, curled up beside a basket of wet linens and dreams of freedom. The next day you're summoned, not to the king, but to the queen. Her chambers are colder than you remember, all marble and lace, smelling faintly of lavender, and something sharper like ink or secrets. She sits by the window, her embroidery untouched. "You've returned," she says, not looking up. "I have, Your Majesty." They say the people liked you. You nod, unsure if this is good or bad. She finally glances your way. That's useful, for now. You're dismissed with a wave like smoke from a candle. Later, the steward hands you a scroll. It's not a performance order, it's a script. Someone has written your act for you. Lines, timing, even reactions. Jokes about the king's generosity, the queen's beauty, and the taxes being a small price for paradise. It's dreadful. You stare at it like it's a trap, because it is. You're not meant to be funny. You're meant to be safe. When you protest, the steward narrows his eyes. You were gone too long. People started remembering their own voices. That's dangerous. So you perform it. Of course you do. In the great hall under flickering chandeliers, and in front of faces like carved masks, you speak the lines. You smile. You pause for laughs that come from the mouths but not the bellies. You bow when expected, and you hate every second. The applause is stiff, polite. Enough. You're sent to entertain foreign envoys next, a delegation from the north. Stoic, thick-bearded men who sit like trees and blink slowly when you mimic the castle guards. One of them finally chuckles when you balance a spoon on your forehead and say, "This is how we measure nobility here by shine." Afterward, one approaches and says, "You are not what I expected." You smile. Few of us are. Then one night it happens. You're in the kitchen stealing a crust of bread when Raina corners you again. Her eyes are tired. Her voice is low. "They're watching you," she says. "They always watch me." "No," she whispers. "Really watching. Since your tour. Since the peasants laughed with you." You chew slowly, suddenly aware of every shadow in the room. "You're not just a fool anymore," she says. "You're a voice, and voices get silenced. You want to argue. Say it was just a tour, just jokes, just entertainment. But you know it wasn't. It was something else, something more dangerous than satire in the Great Hall. Connection. They can laugh at you. They can control that. But laughter with you, that means understanding, shared truth, solidarity. That means power. You start to notice it more. The steward watching you rehearse. The guards outside your chamber. The advisor always nearby now, always quiet, always listening. You tone it down, play dumb, go back to pratfalls and gibberish. You let them think the road made you soft. But inside a seed is growing, because for the first time you know you're not alone. That somewhere out there in towns with cracked cobblestones and crooked taverns, people remember the fool who spoke truth in riddles. And maybe one day that matters. For now, though, you dance, you joke, you smile. But behind your painted grin, you're watching too. Because once they laughed with you. And that memory, they can't erase that. You start leaving your mark in small ways. Nothing bold. Nothing that would earn you a trip to the dungeons or the stocks. Just whispers tucked into rhymes, hidden meanings laced inside absurd routines and metaphors so layered they pass like smoke over the heads of nobles but strike like arrows into the hearts of servants and guards and scribes. You develop a character, Sir Bellyflap, the brave, a dim-witted knight with too much armor and not enough sense. He rides an invisible horse and makes bold proclamations about defending the kingdom from imaginary invaders. The court finds him hilarious, especially the part where he trips over commoners sleeping on the drawbridge. But the servants, they understand. They laugh harder than they should. That night, one of the castle's scribes catches you in the corridor and slips a note into your sleeve. No words, just a tiny sketch. It's you in motley standing over a crowd, a speech bubble over your head, filled not with jokes, but with fire. You burn it, of course, but you remember it. Even Reginald seems to notice your change. You visit him in the kitchens, now fat and spoiled, more pet than poultry. You sit beside his perch and talk softly. You ask him if he remembers the road, the mud, the towns, the laughter. He squawks and pecks your boot. I'll take that as a yes. You still perform, of course. You dance like your life depends on it, because it does. You fall on cue, juggle with flair, twist your face into grotesque shapes. But now, in the quiet moments between gags, you add a line, a word, a truth. If the king's taxes get any higher, you joke one night he'll start charging us to breathe. But don't worry, he's promised discounts for loyal inhalers. The nobles laugh. The servants grin. You start to get requests, not from lords or ladies, but from the castle's underbelly. A boy in the stables asks if you can do a bit about the master of horses. A maid wants you to mock the new bishop's sermons. A blacksmith's apprentice dares you to imitate the queen's accent just once. You never say no, but you know which lines can be crossed and which only flirt with danger. You become something more than a jester. You become a mirror, a quiet rebellion wrapped in bells and slapstick. The peasants see it. The guards hear it. Even some of the younger nobles start to watch you more closely. Their laughter tinged with something that looks suspiciously like admiration. But not everyone is amused. One evening, after a particularly clever bit about the kingdom of empty bowls, the king's advisor corners you in the hallway. He speaks softly, his breath cold as stone. "You're very funny," he says. "Too funny, perhaps. You offer a bow. I aim to please. Please only the king," he replies. "Or you'll find yourself performing to an audience of worms." And then he walks away. You don't sleep that night. You begin hearing rumors. A jester in the east was found drowned in his own chamber pot. Another vanished during a hunt, kicked by a deer, they claimed. There's talk of a fool who tried to start a rebellion by speaking truth during a festival. No one remembers his name. You do. You used to travel together. Once. His name was Tomas. He juggled knives and ideas. You perform the next day with a smile that's too wide, eyes that don't blink enough, and hands that shake just enough to pass for theatrical flair. You stick to safe jokes, funny animals, clumsy knights, long-winded monks. But that night, when no one is looking, you scribble a verse on the back of a wine list and tuck it into a crack in the stone wall near the servants' corridor. When truth wears motley, it dances past swords. You don't sign it. You never will. But you know someone will find it. And maybe, just maybe, they'll start to understand. That even in the cruelest court, under the sharpest eyes and heaviest crowns, the fool still speaks, and he remembers. The summer heat presses down on the castle like a heavy curtain. Stone walls that once chilled your bones now trap the warmth, turning corridors into ovens and chambers into sweat boxes. Nobles fan themselves with embroidered silks, while servants glisten and wilt under the same sun. You, of course, are still in full costume, layers of patched cloth and dyed velvet that soak up the heat like punishment. And you're performing more than ever. The king grows restless in summer. Boredom, you've learned, is the true enemy of royalty. He craves distraction, louder, faster, newer. Your name is called nearly every evening now, sometimes twice. The other jesters come and go, some fake illness, others disappear for assignments. A few simply vanish. You stop asking where they go. Your voice grows hoarse. Your knees swell. But you don't stop, because this isn't just performance anymore. It's strategy. You walk the line between ridicule and rebellion with the practiced grace of a tightrope artist. Every joke is a code. Every pratfall a shield. You're not the best jester anymore, you're the clever one. The one the servants whisper about. The one the kitchen boys mimic when no one's watching. And that makes you dangerous. So you play dumb. You make a fool of yourself more deliberately. Bigger tumbles, sillier songs. You keep their laughter shallow, their eyes away from the deeper meaning. But when you drop lines like, A noble's pockets are like his promises, full of holes, and missing when needed. The servants don't just laugh, they nod. They understand. One evening you're pulled aside by a young guard, barely more than a boy with freckles and nervous hands. "I liked what you said," he murmurs, "about the taxes and the empty bowls." You raise an eyebrow. "That was just a jest." He shakes his head. "It wasn't." "Not really, was it?" You don't answer, but your silence says enough. He slips you a folded scrap of parchment, a map, faint lines, meeting points, places beyond the castle. You don't look at it until you're alone. It's a network, not of nobles, but of people, blacksmiths, bakers, guards, servants, a courier from the Eastern Gate, a mason's apprentice in the city. They're talking, quietly, carefully, and they see you as one of them. It terrifies you. And yet there's something else. Hope. A word you haven't felt in years. It tastes strange, dangerous. You tucked the map into the lining of your doublet. You keep performing. You juggle at a wedding. You sing at a funeral. You dance during a thunderstorm while lightning cracks the sky behind the turrets and nobles cheer from behind rain-proofed glass. You mock yourself so thoroughly one night that even the queen says, "Poor creature. He doesn't even know how pathetic he is." You bow so deeply your spine pops, but inside you're awake. You begin writing again. New verses. Smarter ones. Jokes sharpened like daggers but wrapped in velvet. You memorize them. Burn the parchment. Sometimes you slip one into your act. The king's crown is heavy, you joke one evening, but not as heavy as a hungry stomach. Laughter. Light. Careless, except from the back, where a cook and a stable hand exchange glances. They heard it. Another time I asked a noble what he'd trade for a warm meal. He said, "My conscience." I told him it wasn't worth much. The steward scowls, but the scribe behind him smirks. You start meeting with people under the guise of rehearsals. A broom closet becomes a place of whispered questions. A laundry room, a space for laughter that's not entirely theatrical. Someone tells you about a merchant's son arrested for stealing bread. Someone else tells you the tax collectors broke a weaver's loom and blamed it on insufficient tribute. You remember those faces. You turn them into jokes, and the court laughs, never knowing they're laughing at themselves. But not everyone is fooled. The king begins watching you more closely, not just during performances, at meals, in the garden. Once you catch him standing outside your chamber at night, just listening, not saying a word. The advisor is always nearby now, never blinking, always still. You double down on the fool act. You pretend to chase shadows. You talk to tapestries. You hold serious debates with Reginald, who now lives in luxury and pecks crumbs from goblets. You make them believe you've gone harmlessly mad, but beneath the bells and grease paint, you're thinking, plotting, preparing. Because one day when the court least expects it, the fool might speak one truth too sharp to laugh away. And when he does, the walls might shake or fall. By autumn, your jokes have become smoke signals. They rise above the fire of each performance, flickering subtle and invisible to the oblivious, but unmistakable to those who know where to look. You've learned how to say things without saying them, how to tell the truth while still making them laugh, how to be invisible in plain sight. But invisibility you're discovering has a cost. Your name, your real one, is gone from every corner of the castle. Even in whispers, you're only the fool or the king's clown. You overhear two nobles discussing you in passing. One says he's like a cat that always lands on his feet. The other shrugs, until someone cuts the cat's legs off. Charming. Still you endure. A new harvest festival is declared, some attempt by the king to rally the loyalty of the people after a rough tax season. You're the main attraction, of course. You're expected to dance tumble jest and deliver a monologue about how grateful the peasants must be to enjoy such bounty under such gracious rule. It's supposed to be propaganda. You make it poetry. You take the stage in front of a crowd, half-starved, half-scowling, and you begin. You speak of the bountiful air the peasants are allowed to breathe, the abundance of promises they're fed, and how the king's generosity is matched only by his appetite. You say it all with a grin in rhymes and riddles with enough spin to let it pass as parody. But they hear it. They laugh with their mouths, but not their eyes. The nobles titter. The king chuckles. The advisor, as always, watches. Later in your chamber, you find a single copper coin tucked beneath your pillow. Scratched into it crudely, almost illegibly, are the words, "We hear you." You sit there holding it like it's a crown, and in that moment you realize something terrifying and beautiful. You've become more than a jester. You're a messenger. That changes everything. Now every time you're on stage, you scan the crowd for eyes that lock with yours just a moment too long. For servants who wipe tears after laughing. For guards who don't quite smirk, but don't quite frown either. There's a pulse now, a rhythm beneath the castle walls. You feel it in the stone. Something is shifting, slowly, silently, but shifts draw scrutiny. After one performance where you joked about nobles using bread as footrests because it's cheaper than feeding the poor, you're summoned by the advisor. Not in public, in private. His chamber is small, cold, lined with books that feel more like weapons than knowledge. He says nothing for a long time, just stares. Then you're clever. You stay silent. He leans forward. Too clever. Still you say nothing. Don't mistake laughter for safety, he warns. Kings enjoy jesters because they believe they own the punchline. But if you begin writing the jokes for yourself, he lets the sentence hang. You nod once, deeply, respectfully. He smiles and dismisses you. But when you leave, your hands are cold, and not from the air. You sleep poorly. Your dreams now come in jumbled scenes, a silent stage, a broken lute, a crowd cheering while someone is dragged away in chains. You wake with your heart racing, unsure if you were the performer or the prisoner. Still, the shows go on. A winter ball, a royal birthday, a funeral for a knight who tripped on his own sword. All require your presence, your performance, your mask. And all the while the people in the shadows draw closer. A chambermaid whispers, "It's working." A baker's son says, "We're almost ready." You never ask what they mean. You don't have to. One night Raina finds you. She looks thinner, paler, but her eyes burn bright. They'll ask for more, she says. Who the people? When the time comes. They'll want you to speak. Really speak. You shake your head. I'm just the jester. She grips your wrist. You're the only one they'll listen to. And then she's gone again. You sit with that for a long time. Because it's true. No one sees you coming. Not the nobles, not the guards, not even the king. But the people they're watching, waiting. And when the time is right, your voice ridiculous, painted and padded in rhyme might be the one that opens the gates. Until then, you dance, you fall, you jest, and you listen for laughter with weight behind it. Because in this kingdom, laughter isn't just relief, it's resistance. The winter deepens. Cold wind bites through stone walls and tapestries flutter like haunted flags. Fires are kept low to ration wood, and the castle's many halls echo louder than usual. Footsteps carry. Whispers spread. And through it all, you keep performing. But now every step you take in the court feels like walking on thin ice, smiling, dancing, joking with bells at your ankles and fear in your gut. It's not just you. The servants move quieter now. The kitchen staff glance over their shoulders before speaking. Guards whisper with one another and fall silent when you pass. Something is building, but no one names it. No one has to. Then one night, a small slip of parchment appears in your chamber, tucked under your water jug, folded unmarked, inside a single line. At midwinter's feast the fool shall speak. No signature, no symbol, just ink and intent. You stare at it for hours. It could be a trap. It could be bait. Or it could be a signal. The moment everyone's been waiting for. You burn the note, but the words remain branded in your thoughts. The midwinter feast is the grandest celebration of the year, an indulgent night of meat music and masks. Nobles wear cloaks lined in wolf fur. Gold flows like wine. The court forgets the hunger outside the gates, the cold in the peasant huts, the rebellions crushed in spring. And the fool always performs. You're the main event, of course. The closing act. The final laugh before midnight tolls and the royal toast begins. This time you're told to make it joyful, to honor the strength of the throne, to remind everyone how blessed they are to live in such a glorious kingdom. You nod, you bow, you accept the instructions. Then you begin to write your own lines. You stay up late for nights on end, muttering to yourself in the laundry corridor, scribbling verses in the soot, behind the hearth, reciting rhymes to Reginald in the pantry. While he pecks at raisins, you practice falling with perfect timing. You choreograph your absurdities to a rhythm only you can hear. You stitch a new sash into your costume. It's red. The color of wine, the color of velvet, the color of warning. The night of the feast arrives. The great hall is lit with hundreds of candles. Icicles glitter along the window frames. Laughter spills like heat into the frozen air. The king sits taller tonight, adorned in robes so heavy with jewels, they barely move when he breathes. The queen is draped in silver. The advisor watches everything, his eyes like nails driven into every corner. And you step onto the stage. You open with familiar gags, slapstick, puns. The audience chuckles, then laughs, then cheers. You hit all the notes they expect until you don't. Halfway through your act, you pause. You let silence fall. Then slowly, you begin a new story. It's about a kingdom ruled by a crow, a clever, cunning bird with feathers of gold and a crown too heavy for its head. The crow sings sweet songs to the nobles while plucking feathers from the poor. The crowd chuckles, nervously. You continue. The crow builds a nest on the backs of the people, promises them warmth and shelter, then raises the rent. It taxes their dreams. It finds their hunger. And still it demands applause. Now the room is quieter. The king doesn't laugh. You kneel wide-eyed as the crow commands a jester to dance again and again until his shoes wear through and his voice cracks. The jester asks, "Will you ever let me rest?" And the crow says, "Only if the people forget your words. Then you deliver your final line." But the people did not forget. And when they rose, they remembered the jester who taught them how. Silence. Absolute silence. Then one laugh, a single peasant boy in the gallery. He can't help it. Then another, and another. It spreads slowly, defiantly, until the hall echoes with laughter, not mocking, not cruel, but electric. The king stands. The laughter dies instantly. You bow, heart thudding like a war drum. The king approaches, slowly, step by step. You prepare for the worst, for the blow, the order, the end. But instead he says, "A fine tale." He turns back to his seat. The feast continues. But something has changed. You've said the thing no one dared say, and lived. You return to your cot that night, not as the fool, but as something else. A symbol, a spark, and maybe, just maybe, a beginning. You half expect to be dragged from your cot before dawn. Instead, morning arrives quietly. The sun filters through frost-bitten windows. Reginald clucks once and hops down from the barrel where he sleeps, pecking at nothing in particular. The castle stirs as it always does, slowly, groggily, with the bitter rhythm of winter routines. But something is different. The servants nod to you as you pass. Not all of them. Not obviously. But some hold your gaze just a second too long. One smiles not mockingly, but sincerely. You even catch a guard humming a tune you improvised months ago during your dog night bit. Small ripples, but ripples nonetheless. You're not summoned that morning, nor the next. You're left alone, as though the king himself isn't sure what to do with you now. A jester who didn't cross the line, but drew a new one. On the third day, you're called. Not to the great hall, to the gardens. It's an odd place for a summons in the dead of winter. The hedges are bare, the fountains frozen, and the statues covered in frost-dusted cloth. You wait under a leafless tree until the queen arrives, swaddled in furs, her breath a thin mist in the air. She walks with deliberate grace, hands folded. When she speaks, it's quiet, measured. "You were warned," she says. You say nothing. You danced too close to fire. Still, you say nothing. She turns to look directly at you, and yet they laughed. A long pause. The wind whistles through empty branches. She steps closer. We cannot control laughter. We can only fear it. You blink. The statement is too honest, too exposed. Then she says, "Be careful, Jester. You are no longer beneath notice." And she walks away. You stand there long after she's gone, unsure whether the encounter was a warning or a strange kind of blessing. You begin to perform again, rarely, but with increasing attention. Each act is scrutinized, each word noted. Nobles now watch not for amusement, but for threat. You've become intriguing. Dangerous, perhaps, or maybe just inconvenient. But the people, they adore you. Your words travel faster than you do. A farmer's boy repeats your Donkey King bit to his mother. A tavern bard in a neighboring town sings a parody of your Jester tale, claiming the fool who wore bells but heard chains. You didn't write that line, but you wish you had. Soon others come to you, quietly, slipping in and out of rooms like shadows. A scribe leaves a coded message on your wash basin. A guard warns you that patrol patterns are shifting. A maid shows you a hidden corridor that leads to the old chapel ruins abandoned for now. None of them say the word, but you know what it is. Change. And in the center of it all, you. Still painted, still juggling, still smiling. But now your smile means something. It's not just entertainment anymore. It's signal, camouflage, hope. One afternoon, you're summoned to perform for a foreign ambassador, an austere man with skin like leather and a voice like dried leaves. You keep the jokes safe, international relations and all that. You poke fun at local wine, mimic the ambassador's interpreter gently, and close with a song about castle plumbing that brings down the house. After the show, the ambassador pulls you aside. In my country, he says the jester wears red, so we know where to aim. You grin. In mine, we wear red, so you mistake the wound for decoration. He stares for a moment, then smiles, just a little, and walks away. That night, you write a new line on the inside of your sleeve. Every joke is a blade if the handle is hidden well enough. You fall asleep, not in fear, but in purpose. Because now you know they can watch you, they can listen, but they can't predict you. And in a kingdom where everyone knows their place, being unpredictable might be the greatest power of all. By the time the thaw begins, you've perfected the art of vanishing in plain sight. You move through the castle like a shadow in daylight, loud when needed, invisible when not. You slip between roles with ease, a jest in the morning, a whisper in the afternoon, a spark in the cellar by candlelight. You're still the fool, but now no one is quite sure whose fool you are. The king calls on you more often now, though his requests are vague, almost distracted. He's restless, laughing too quickly, frowning too deeply, speaking in half sentences. He tells you to cheer up the court, then forgets he said it. He waves away your most brilliant performances, then applauds the ones you barely rehearsed. He is in short afraid. He doesn't know why not exactly. But the tension is palpable. The nobles sense it. The servants feel it. Even Reginald, now too fat to fly, has taken to squawking when the king's name is spoken. The queen watches everything. She says little, but her eyes follow every movement. You suspect she knows more than anyone. But she plays her own game, and you've learned not to ask questions you don't want honest answers to. The court begins to change, subtly at first. One noble leaves to tend his estates and never returns. A visiting priest vanishes between vespers and supper. The steward stops giving you notes. You hear murmurs in the corridors. Not rebellion, not yet, but readiness. The air feels like a held breath. Then one morning you find a package in your chamber. Inside, a new costume. It's heavier than your usual attire, stitched from dark velvet and lined with hidden seams. The colors are still bright reds and yellows, but muted, purposeful. The bells have been replaced with tiny brass plates, etched with symbols. You don't recognize all of them. You put it on without hesitation and find a note tucked in the sleeve. The next stage is yours. Choose your moment. The Spring Festival is days away. Traditionally, it's a riot of music, food performances, a rare moment when commoners are invited into the castle walls. The king has declared this year's celebration to be twice as grand, as if splendor might drown unrest. He's asked you to headline the event. You accept. Of course you do. But you say nothing of your plans. You spend the next 3 nights awake walking the grounds, retracing hidden paths. You memorize faces, guards, cooks, the stable master's daughter. You test the acoustics of the grand hall with whispers. You time the guards at the south gate. You mark which tapestries conceal doors, which chandeliers are loose, which steps creak. This performance won't be like the others. It won't be jokes over roast duck and wine. It will be something different. A reckoning in rhyme. A truth wrapped in motley. On the morning of the festival, you stand in front of your cracked mirror. The face paint goes on slower this time. Every stroke of white, every dab of red, every black line carefully drawn. Not a mask anymore. A banner. As you step into the sunlit courtyard, the crowd parts. Nobles on balconies. Peasants on stone benches. Servants standing along the edges, frozen in half-tasks. And at the far end, the throne. The king sits taller than usual. The queen beside him, serene. The advisor off to the side, still unreadable. You bow and begin. You start with laughter, silly rhymes, a juggling act with live eels, a pantomime duel with an invisible knight. The crowd roars. The king claps. Then you shift a new tone. You recite a tale of a kingdom on a hill ruled by a king who built walls so high he couldn't see the people anymore. He made laws from dreams and punished those who woke up. He crowned himself not once but twice, just to be sure. The nobles laugh nervously. The peasants listen intently. You continue. You tell of a jester who wore bells not to amuse but to warn, who danced so others could breathe, who sang so others could speak, who smiled so others could survive. You end with a bow. Then, straightening eyes locked on the king, you say, "The fool remembers what the throne forgets, that laughter cannot be coutumed." Silence. Long, dense, heavy, then a cheer. From the far wall, one voice, then another, then more. The king doesn't move. The queen smiles barely. The advisor leans in and whispers something. The king stands. He walks toward you. You don't move. He stops inches away and says, "Amuse me again tomorrow." Then he turns and leaves. You don't know if it's a threat or an invitation or a line he didn't write. But it doesn't matter. Because the crowd heard you. The kingdom did too. And tomorrow, you'll speak again. You wake before dawn the next day, heart pounding like a drum. The spring festival is over, but its echoes linger. The castle is quieter than usual, like it's bracing for something. Servants speak in hushed tones. Guards glance more frequently over their shoulders. A noble drops his goblet during breakfast and doesn't bother picking it up. It rolls across the stone floor, clink, 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 and everyone stares at it as if it's a sword. You go through the motions. Wash your face, sharpen your tongue, stretch the aches from your back and knees. Reginald watches from his perch near the hearth, his eyes sharper than usual. You give him a nod. He does not return it. He's a chicken after all, but even he seems to know. The king's words still ring in your ears. Amuse me again tomorrow. And now it is tomorrow. You're summoned mid-morning, not to the grand hall this time, but to the council chamber. You hesitate at the door. Inside, the air is thick with heat and hush. The king sits at the head of the long table. Beside him, the queen statuesque and unreadable. The advisor is in the shadows, hands folded. A few nobles linger near the walls, their faces pale, their bodies stiff. You step inside. No one speaks. No one has to. This isn't a performance. It's a verdict. The king gestures for you to stand in the center of the room. The court, he says slowly, has questions. You nod. He leans forward. What are you, fool? A trap, of course. The oldest one. You smile. Not too wide. I am a mirror, your majesty. Bent, bright, loud, but honest. A murmur runs through the nobles, and yesterday's tale, the queen adds softly, was it honest? You pause, then bow. Every jest holds truth, my lady. The trick is knowing which part to laugh at. The king rises, paces, then stops. Do the people still laugh with you? You meet his gaze. They do. And if I asked you to stop, you don't answer right away. Because there is no right answer. Only a question of how this ends. I would obey you, say slowly, but the laughter wouldn't. It doesn't belong to me. Silence. Then the advisor speaks. Your Majesty, fools can be replaced. The queen tilts her head, but symbols cannot. The king's jaw tightens. You stand motionless, waiting. Finally, he waves a hand. Dismissive, uncertain, exhausted. Then keep your bells, he mutters. For now. You bow deep, steady, then turn to go. And as you leave the chamber, one of the nobles, an old man with shaking hands, brushes past you and murmurs, "Well played." You don't answer. You don't even turn. You just walk. And the walk is different now. Not because you are safe. You're not. You never were. But because you understand the power you carry, the responsibility of it, the echo of your stories, the weight of your words, and the simple, dangerous truth that laughter, when shaped by courage, can bend even the sharpest crown. In the days that follow, you continue performing, sometimes with rhyme, sometimes with silence. You speak less, but when you do, people listen. You are invited to smaller rooms, darker halls, deeper corners. Not for jokes, for messages. The network grows. Faces change. But the rhythm remains. Speak, smile, survive, and sometimes inspire. One night, while sitting alone under the stars, your costume in a heap beside you, and Reginald snoring softly nearby, you begin to write a new story. Not a joke, not a monologue, a legacy. You start it like this. Once there was a fool who told the truth, and the world, terrified, laughed. You pause, then write the next line, and the next, and the next, because stories like laughter are impossible to kill, and fools outlive kings. Wind down section begins below. And now as the embers fade and the candles burn low, you settle into stillness. The castle is quiet. The masks have come off. The laughter has softened into memory. You've danced, stumbled, spoken, and survived not just the court, but something far deeper, the weight of being heard. Outside your window, the wind hushes through the stone arches. Somewhere a door creaks gently, and you lie back not as the jester, not even as the symbol, but simply as yourself. Whatever that name is, whatever form it's taken now. The bells no longer jingle when you move. You've learned how to silence them. Not because you're afraid, but because sometimes silence says more. Your body aches, not just from performance, but from holding it all in. The secrets, the sarcasm, the hidden truths tucked inside rhymes. But now here in this quiet moment, you let it go. You remember the muddy roads, the laughter of strangers, the weight of the daisy from a child's hand. You remember the fear in the king's eyes, the softness in the queen's voice, the defiance in your own. You were supposed to be nothing more than a fool, but you became something else. Not a hero, not a rebel, not even a prophet. Just a voice. And sometimes that's enough. So close your eyes now. Let the story rest. Let the stone walls melt into dream. You've earned your silence. You've earned your peace. The court will still be there in the morning. But tonight the kingdom sleeps, and the fool at last smiles without performance.